Hi everyone. Today I'd like to talk about whether there's evidence for extra dimensions beyond the four that we are accustomed to, width, length, height, and time. Now I became interested in this topic because I took a lot of math and like 2 years of calculus, linear algebra, probability, and all the reading I've done on Wikipedia, I came across the concept of taking cross sections of geometric objects. Excuse me. So that led me to perform a simple thought experiment, which is, let's say you have a point, a line, a plane, and a cube. Now you can think of a point as what you get if you take a cross section of a line. You can think of a line as what you get if you take a cross section of a plane. And you can think of a plane as what you get if you take a cross section of a cube. So if you accept that, then you can extend what you know so far by saying that a line is made up of an infinite number of points, a plane is made up of an infinite number of lines, and a cube is made up of an infinite number of planes. So mathematics says that there is such a construct called a tesseract, and if you take a cross section of that, you get a cube. Now, in other words, a tesseract is made up of an infinite number of cubes. So a pentaract is made up of an infinite number of tesseracts, and so on. It just keeps going up. So in geometry, a square, which is just a special case of a plane, has 2 dimensions. A cube has 3 dimensions. A tesseract has 4 dimensions, and a pentaract has 5 dimensions. So if you accept that we live in a 3-dimensional world with time as the temporal 4th dimension, then you can think of all of us here on Earth living in 4-dimensional space. So you can think of us living inside a tesseract, which could be just one of an infinite number of tesseracts inside a pentaract. But what does the science say about this theoretical exercise we just made? Is there any evidence of extra dimensions other than the 4 dimensions we know of? Well, Professor Stefan, he pointed me to an article in Forbes that talks about the inverse square law. So an example of this law that I got from slrlounge.com. It's a photography website. So let's say that you are a photographer, and as a photographer, having the right amount of light on your subject is important. So let's say that at 1 meter away, you have 100% of the light from the power flash of your camera hitting your subject. So you are 1 meter away from your subject, and when you click the button to take the photograph, the power flash flashes, and 100% of the light from the power flash reaches your subject. So let's say that you move your power flash away from your subject from 1 meter away to 2 meters away. So you step back a meter away. So now you're 2 meters away from your subject. At 1 meter away, you had 100% light from the power flash hitting your subject. And now at 2 meters away, would you say that only 50% of the light from the power flash is hitting your subject? Well, if you say that, you would be wrong, because according to the inverse square law, which is simply 1 over the distance squared, since the distance is now 2 meters, so that's 2 squared, which is 4, 1 over 4, you now only have 25% of the light from your power flash hitting your subject. So within the scope of photography, as you move further away from your subject, you will lose light from your power flash, and you will lose this light at a faster rate than you might think or predict or guess. So the main argument against extra dimensions comes from the inverse square law. So as Newton proposed in his gravitational theory, the strength of the gravitational force changes in proportion to the square of your distance from an object. So according to Einstein, gravity is not a force, but a property of space-time itself, and Einstein's general relativity says that the inverse square law, as it pertains to gravity, comes from the geometry of space-time. So in a universe with 3 spatial dimensions and 1 dimension of time, the gravitational force at close distances must follow the inverse square law. If the universe had more spatial dimensions, then the force of gravity would be very different. Professor Stefan also said to me that if we do live within a larger dimension, then gravity should fall off or dissipate at 1 over distance cubed. but we only see gravity dissipating at 1 over distance squared, the inverse square law. So that means either we don't live in another dimension, or we have the wrong topology, or we are missing something with conservation of energy at such large distances. Or gravity does dissipate, but so subtly and at such minute levels that we currently can't measure this supposed dissipation.